me on my end.
What's up, everybody? It's Sean and Vic.
Hi.
Today, the subject that I've selected for the live stream is what to do to get better at pool when you're not playing. So this is mostly just going to be talking, obviously, because that's what I do here. I think that, my general style of coaching is more hands-off, and I try to not give people as many technical advice things. I think in their journey, more of the stuff that you really need to understand is the mental stuff, and I think a little bit of it, not even a little bit of it, but a lot of it is how to improve at pool over the long run when you can't put in unlimited time. So I will tell people that one of the things that I think that helps you is to understand that when you're playing pool, in order to play well, you need to be able to focus on what you're doing. And anything that forces you to focus on what you're doing will help you be better at pool. And focusing on what you're doing at pool will help you be better at everything. So it's more like a lifestyle where you use your awareness on purpose all the time, you direct it all the time, so that when you're playing pool, you're not doing anything different than you would be doing all the time. And it takes effort to do that. I think it's worth it, and I would explain to you is that it's pretty apparent to me, and I think to most people that actually do the logical thought, which is that if I was aware of what I was doing 100% of the time and able to direct that awareness on whatever I wanted to at any time, day or night, and use that productively to get better at something, then it probably would work. And that I think that it takes a little bit of energy just to learn how to be a little bit more aware of what you're doing all the time, so that you can then use that awareness to do whatever you want, because that's what it's all about. It's not being distracted, not looking at your phone, or going and hanging out with whoever because they asked you to, and you don't have focus on things that would actually maybe help your life better. Not to say that hanging out with your friends or if you're on your phone you could be learning things. It's not like that's not what it's about. It's more about just selecting the activity on purpose, using your free will. Because pool is a lot, in fact all of it's about free will. Everything you do, you chose to do. So hopefully you chose to do it because you wanted to do it. You opted to do it because it was the right thing to do. And to me, that is what makes pool so amazing. Partly is that everyone that hits the ball is doing it in their own way. They're expressing themselves, because you can't express someone else's shot or stroke or whatever when you're hitting the ball. It's always you. That's why I said this is the quote on my shirt, is that shoot your shot. And I tell people that this, what it means to me is not just that you have to decide what you're going to do, but you got to understand that you are the one that's always doing it. It doesn't matter if you're doing it because I said so, because whoever said so, or whatever. You are the one that's doing it, so it's your shot. So you need to be choosing it. And part of learning how to be better at pool involves moments of your life. You're in control if you choose to be, and then the more automated you make everything, without making decisions about why you're doing it, the less control you have over your life, and thus that equates to playing pool and having less control. Because if I could focus myself, just on this out right here is a good example. In order to be able to run the out, say it's 9-ball, which is what it looks like it's set up here for, I have to make choices. I have to choose to try to put the cue ball somewhere so that then it will lead me to a place where I can make the next ball, which so 1, 2, 3, right? So at some point I have to make a decision about where to try to put the cue ball, and that's going to be a deductive reasoning type thing. It's going to be a balance of what's easy and what's effective, right? Maybe you build in a little bit of panache and style into your life, so then you don't want to just hit it blah blah blah. You want to hit it a certain way. It's all fine. It doesn't matter. That's not what matters. What matters is you're choosing on purpose. So when you're not playing pool, it's helpful to choose and know you're choosing, and then focus your choices, so that then when you're actually playing pool, it's more of a habit. It's just like about building habits that can help you with pool, and then also when you're playing pool, you're building habits that will help you with your life. That's how you get better, is by doing more of the same things all the time that are benefiting you and benefiting your life. That's, I think, what makes pool an amazing game, is that the discipline that you have to be able to play this game at a higher level requires you to build habits into your life that are actually useful for living and make your life a little bit easier. So it's, I recommend any activity that helps you build focus and helps you make choices will help you with pool. Versus if you're gonna like playing more games where you have to choose strategy, and pick a move. Those are good games to play playing pool, because part of the hard part about life is that you got to make choices, and if you don't play games, you're not necessarily making as many choices. You're kind of going along with choices that have been made in the past, and now you're not re-choosing because you're just going with the flow of a choice that's already been made. But at some point, choices need to be made, and then if you're not in practice of making choices, now you're a little bit less sure of how to, like, what kind of choice should I make? Because any choice is legitimate. It doesn't even matter if you're shooting yourself in the foot on purpose. It's more of just like creating a scenario where you're actively doing it on purpose, not just like seeing what's going to happen and just letting things go, unless you've chosen to do that. That's what the point of it is that you have to have the awareness of what you're doing, and you have to be able to then learn how to focus it. So it's about being aware that you have choices to make, and then on top of that, making choices, and then through the act of making choices, because you're doing that experientially, I think that you should understand that everything you do, you get better at. So if you're like, I'm going to make more decisions, your decision-making power is going to get better. Obviously, because that's like, well, how are you going to get better at making decisions? Now, you might explore what kind of decisions you want to make and all that. That leads to your awareness. It's like, why am I making the decision that I'm making? What's important to me in this situation before I make a decision. So then there's, I think that a good habit to get into as well is to accumulate a little bit more data before you make your decision on what to do. I think that in pool, it's easy to get a little bit emotionally distracted, and then you get tunnel vision, and then you're acting upon impulses that maybe not leading you to the best place. And by just kind of staying afloat of that and realizing that that's the case, is that you can then, one of the things that you do with pool is you build your instincts up by practicing routine situations, so that when the emotions start to take hold of you, you have a program that you have set aside that will help you govern yourself when you're in these states of stress. So one part of learning how to be more aware is like, you got to build a program, and I would recommend doing this off the table to help yourself be and learn how to like lower your stress level through mindfulness activities. You can do like, they say just squeezing your hand as hard as you can for 45 seconds actually can reduce overall tension in the body for a long time. And that if you remember at the moment that you're starting to feel stressed, that you just focus on that, then your body will get more relaxed as you're focusing your energy and you're focusing that tension. Then you let it go. You release the tension from your hand and from your body. Or you could even they have other different kinds of relaxation techniques. You just start from your toes, and you flex your toes, and you go up to your feet, and then your calves, and your shins, and then you just, without even moving, and you just flex all the way up, and then let it release, and then creates a relaxation. You can meditate, you can do mindfulness activities, you can try to immerse yourself a little bit more fully in your day-to-day activities, like, whatever you're doing in the morning, you just do it a little bit more actively, and you choose the motion as you're doing it. You don't just go through the motions of you wake up, You go to the bathroom, you take a shower, you drink your coffee, instead of just like, like being on your phone while you're doing all that. Now you can be more active about what you're doing, choosing it, thinking the thoughts. You could be preparing yourself mentally for the day. And then now when you're playing pool, you're in the habit of like, okay, well, how am I gonna prepare myself for the rest of this rack? And getting yourself set up for it by being like ready with your energy, ready with your mind, ready to focus, and that becomes part of the habit of just living your life as like aware as you can. Focusing on other things that can help you play pool is like, well, you should have a certain level of fitness. Believe it or not, just to walk around the table at a heightened emotional state, you're going to lose your breath. It's not even really necessarily the stress that does it. What it is partly is the activity of moving. If you're out of shape and you walk around this table 8 to 9 times and you don't breathe enough, and you're standing, when you get down over the ball, this takes more energy than just standing. So the longer you're down here, the more energy you're using, and you need to breathe. Part of that is like a mindfulness thing where it's like if you forget to breathe because you're focused so much on what's going on that you're gonna get tired, and then you're gonna lose focus, and then we're gonna be at that spot. So part of it is you got to stay on top of what's happening through your awareness of not getting so immersed and so into it that you can't even breathe properly. That's part of it. Is like you gotta at some point spend energy just learning how to exist and focus on your energy level without even worrying about what's going on, because that is another layer above it that adds complexity. It's very difficult to like figure out how to focus my breath while I'm trying to run the balls. If I've never even focused my breath before, how am I going to do that while I'm actually doing another activity? You got to separate the activities if possible so that you can learn them one at a time and get better at it in a vacuum, so that then you can apply that technique to another situation where you don't feel like, oh, if I apply this technique, that it makes other changes to the situation that I can't predict, and that's as productive as if I've learned a technique that I'm now going to take and I'm going to implement it when I'm playing pool. Now I know that the technique is a standalone technique. I don't have to worry about the technique failing while I'm playing pool. I'm going to try to incorporate something that I'm a little bit familiar with, and then use that to hopefully help me advance. You're going to have to work through multiple different potential solutions for every single problem that you face in pool to find your way of managing and your way of getting through that moment. Do you have anything?
No. 3 people.
Nice. 3 people on. I love you guys. Yeah, I like to try to like take a moment for myself in the morning, especially if I'm going to play a game, play matches later, competition coming up. I spend as much of my like free time, meaning like you can be driving now instead of you can be focusing on that moment. You can also be focusing on things that you're likely to encounter during a match, focusing on your behaviors that you're going to try to have automated for a match, for a situation, and you can then like kind of like in an effect you're like rehearsing what's about to happen, and through your rehearsal of it, it's like getting an extra repetition in, and whatever you're rehearsing in your mind, you get better at when you're actually doing the action. I don't know when it was a long time ago, at least in my memory. I'm 47. I remember this from back when I was younger. They did a study on visualization with basketball, so it was like, I don't know, 10 or 20, 30 people, 10 groups, or it's 3 different groups of people. One group did not practice, one group visualized only, and one group just shot free throws. It's a free throw shooting thing. They did 2 different or 3 different control groups, and so that the first, they threw however many 10 shots and made whatever the percentage was from each of the three groups of no practice, visualization only, and then physical practice. And it was shown that the visualization only practice was not quite as effective as actually physically doing the action. However, it was noticeably, statistically more effective than no visualization and no practice. So that the ideal, and what that means to me, and the takeaway that I got from that, is that doing it is the best. Obviously, if you want to get better at this, you should be here doing it. Next to that is practicing in your mind doing it. So, whatever you're working on with your pool game, if you spend time thinking about how you're getting better at it through your visualization of it, and you learn how to visualize what you're doing, then you'll get better at it. And the thing that I think people struggle with is like, well, I have trouble visualizing the thing that I'm struggling on. And I'm like, well, obviously you do, because if you didn't struggle with it, you wouldn't be bad at it. You wouldn't be trying to get better at it. It is just exactly how it is. The struggle of not being able to visualize is an analogy for the reason why you're not as good at it, and that once you learn how to visualize it, you'll realize that you're actually better at it. It's being able to see yourself doing it is the hard part. Once you learn how to see yourself doing it, now it's easier to do it. I think that makes sense. The hard part is at the beginning, you can't see yourself doing it, but then also if you're doing it, you can't do it. It's the same thing, but if you spend time like, okay, what do I need to see? For instance, like on this shot here, if I'm just trying to use, a little bit of draw and float to this spot here to play, to get my angle to play up over here, for instance. If I'm having trouble, like, away from the table, visualizing a certain shot, then the goal of the visualization practice becomes, okay, what is my pre-shot routine? What is my desired outcome? All of these things you're gonna have to know in your heart, really, because it doesn't, you can't just create it in your mind so much. It's like a full body awareness activity where you got to decide, okay, what is the stroke feel like in my imagination? What is the strokes, what is the shot, how does it visually look? What can I hear the sound of the contact of the cue ball and the tip that balls together, and develop a sense for what's needed. And then when you actually are coming to the table, then you're just better equipped to shoot the actual shot. On my pre-shot routine, when I'm doing it, the way that I feel like is best for now is that I'm planning exactly the shot. If I don't do that, then I can't determine what the stroke should feel like, because if you don't pick an exact shot, then you don't have an exact stroke. And that, my opinion is that the more precise you can be with your planning, the more precise you can be with your stroke, and the more precise you can be with your shot making, etc., because you have a more clear picture, a sense of what needs to happen. And you can develop that at any moment, and it doesn't have to be pool, it can be anything. You could take a trash can and take a wadded piece of paper or several and just start throwing them into the can, and think about your hand motion and dial it in where this is the exact hand motion that I need to throw it into the thing, and then realize it's the same sort of thing. Obviously it's not as complicated throwing into the trash can, but that's part of what makes pool interesting, is that it's very detailed, but that level of detail is only an extension of a simple thing, which is you just have to understand what your motion needs to be. And once you can just understand that the motion makes the thing happen, now when you want to see this thing happen, you realize the motion that you're about to move your body is what's going to make all that happen. And all you have to do is focus on making that and having the sense of what needs to happen, and then you're allowing your body to do the action. So you're not really commanding anything in a sense. You just have to be like, this is what I want. What is it going to feel like? The sense of it. Because you're not actually going to perform the action. That's the thing. It's like, if I was gonna get down and shoot the shot, you know, say I get down like that and then hit the ball, before I did all of that, what was all my motions gonna be? And having full control of all that. You know, if you're gonna look to see the object ball go in, then you're gonna come line up here, make sure you're in line. Then you're gonna be like, okay, well, I want just a touch of draw here. So the cue ball is not gonna be spinning right or left. So that means that I can't put right or left English on this ball. I have to hit in the center of it. You know, this has all been explained to me by the math of the shot. And then now what I'm trying to do is reproduce. Is like, okay, well, how much residual energy that's left after I cut the ball that's going to be left on the cue ball to make it go this far? And then now I'm just basically going to just be like, okay, well, how does it feel to do that? And then basically that's what I'm going to do with my pre-shot routine. And when you're practicing in your mind, visualizing, you could do approximately the same thing, or you could just work on one portion of it if you're like still building your full, you know, process. Like, say you're working on your grip. That's the thing you can do is like, well, you can just take your cue out, you can hold it, you know, on a table that's roughly the same height, and just swing it for a while and feel it. And know that each one of these, if you thought about hitting the ball with it, would produce a result. So you're thinking, I'm actually making repetitions of my swing every time I hit this ball, you know? So be conscious of how you're doing it. You know, it's like if you're just feeling the stroke, that's fine, but it's like if that swing is not the same as what you might do on, you know, a shot, then it's not as productive as like thinking, okay, what is the stroke for that shot that I'm going to use? That's what you're practicing, because then when you come to the shot, and now I want to get here, now I can see all that happening. You come watch the ball go in, watch this ball go hit here and come up, and then now I'm going to make my body do what physically I see on the table. You know, and obviously you're not going to get exactly where you want it to every time. That's how it works. It's like we're not 100% precise, but by doing a brief visualization activity before we do it, we can much more completely, you know, and, you know, really like feel comfortable that it's going to happen. If you are like thinking, oh, I'm going to make that ball, and then when you're like standing here, you're like, it looks like I'm going to hit full on it. That's probably because you are. You know what I mean? If it looks like you're going to make it, then now you're in business, right? And it's like you gotta have a feel for that. Well, where does that feeling come from? Well, it's you're visualizing what you're about to do from the place that you're at is what's happening. You might not see that, but when you're like don't feel like you're on it, that's because your body's already done the work of seeing what's about to happen next, based on what you're about to tell it to do, and then you're just doing whatever that is. And if it's not what you want, your desired result, then it's still going to be the thing that you see yourself doing. That's how it works. Very rarely are you going to do something that's not what you saw was going to happen. Obviously, there's unintended consequences that maybe you weren't aware of. That's one of the magical things about pool is that over time, since because the game doesn't really change, the table is the same, the balls don't really, there's technology advances, etc. However, the physics are pretty static. I don't think that anything, you know, crazy has been discovered with friction since I've been born. And I don't think that it's necessary that we need to talk about it more than just understanding that things are grippy, you know, and that understanding the grippiness of things, you know, helps us deal with what's going on. And it doesn't take as long as you think. If you're just trying to focus on that one little thing to see that it's a thing, you know, and that you get a sense of what's going to happen when you're aware of it. Like I saw a YouTube video of a lady that was walking down the stairs of her house, and it was a little bit wet outside, and it was raining hard, and she slipped and she almost fell, and she just and she could have avoided that by realizing that maybe it's a little bit slick and that you shouldn't just run out there like it's dry. You know, you got to be a little bit cautious because of the conditions. And you know, with pool, any extra awareness you have to what's really going on, all that will help your visualization. You know, the deeper you get is like you can start incorporating all the cloth and all that stuff. So I say it's like by being more aware of what's going on and seeing what you're about to do. So it's like when you're making choices in your daily life, you're choosing for a future event that's only, maybe a little bit further down, and you're obviously making long-term choices for yourself. And this is kind of the same things in pool that you're doing, is you're making short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals, and now you're going to go after it. It's like the short-term goal here is to make this 3 ball and get position on the 4. The midterm, goal is to make this 9 ball. The long-term goal is to use that, as a body of work to help me then advance for a match. Maybe I'm playing a set with somebody, etc. And it's to win that. And then even a longer-term goal, tournament, life achievements, where you're like building your skill over that and understanding that it's like it all comes from that. So your like daily life has to incorporate that type of activity to get better at this activity. So one of the things that's helpful when you're playing, when you're trying to like understand how do I get better at pool, well, you have to be like, well, where do I want to be? And that's one of the things that you think about when you're not playing pool. When you're playing pool, you're just doing the simple, the obvious thing, When you're not playing, you can tell yourself, oh, okay, I'm going to do these things because that's going to help me get better, and then my long-term goals are going to get achieved. And by setting those goals, and then deciding, okay, within the framework of like the time that I have available, what can I do? And now you have direction because you made choices that are going to help you get better. So when you're outside of the game, visualizing shots, planning for different scenarios, and I would say that one, like everyone is very keen on planning for like the best case scenario to happen. The problem is that by labeling best and worst case scenarios, now you're adding a judgment to the activity, and that now inevitably when you have a best case scenario that you're visualizing, now you have to then prepare yourself for the worst case scenario, because that also is a likelihood of happening. Not necessarily a high likelihood, but I would say that if you're not prepared for the bad things that can happen through your own judgment of bad, obviously it's like bad is not necessarily a thing that's real. It's just a thing that happened and then we deal with it. But by labeling such things, now we're forced to deal with the fact that they exist. If we just didn't care so much about bad or good, realizing that it's just all part of the process of getting better, is that bad things happen that lead us to make choices that are different so that we can not have those bad things happen again, and then as a result we get better. So then really when you say bad thing, it's not actually a bad thing, it just was at the moment maybe unpleasant, uncomfortable, and then we needed to figure out a strategy to avoid future of that, and in the process of all that, that's how we get better at things. We experience things that we don't want to experience again, and then we make changes so that we can less often experience those things. And one of those things that I've helped me is just realizing that, everything can be fun if you choose it to be. You just have to understand what makes things fun, and then you have to redefine fun in a way that makes it to where you can benefit from the activity and enjoy yourself. If you're labeling fun as just mindless whatever, and that's fun, good. I've chosen to decide to relabel fun as being something that actually makes me a better person while I'm being entertained, and pool is one of those things where I can, as much non-fun as it can be at sometimes, I know that it's for the best, and that the long-term success that I have ultimately is predicted by how much, struggle I put myself through, and how many situations where I don't really know what's going to happen, and that makes you better just by effect of that. And that as you get to where you realize that's what's happening, then now the fun and good, bad, and all that stuff kind of like just eases its way into just like, well, we're just living our lives, and every moment is a precious moment. You take the good with the bad, and then you realize that it's all good. And it was just us that was saying that it was bad, but there's no reason for that. We just decided to say that a moment was a bad moment when it wasn't, maybe. And that's part of it is too, is like when you're in your daily life, be very conscious as much as you can about the way that you think and the way that you speak, because that becomes, or that is who you are ultimately as your habits. It's like whatever word you're saying at this moment could be infinite different words, and that means something, that you've chosen it, and that you've defined yourself by saying any word that you say defines you as a person, because you can say literally any words you want. So by saying anything, you're making yourself a thing. So if you don't realize that, I hope that if you're listening to this, that makes you aware that if you start saying things are bad, it makes your life bad. If you say things are good, it makes your life good, because it's your viewpoint that's what's important. It's not the thing that happens. I think most people realize that perspective is everything, and yet it still, I think, needs to be spoken about, that you need to actively, through your awareness, shift your focus and shift your perspective as positively as possible so that you can enjoy your time on this planet. It's not going to help you be better at pool, per se, by being a positive person, because you can be negative and have all of the reasons why you have, that you have to be good, because if you're not, then so many bad things will happen. And that can be your lifestyle if you want it to be, or you can choose to just do it because it's fun. That could also be your life. You have to choose. The shots are still the same shots. It doesn't matter. Like that's the thing that's funny about it. It's, you have to decide through your free will how you're going to be, and by being aware of what you're doing, which is, a lot of it is the words you use, dictate how you're going to be. So all you have to do then is really just change your words. That takes effort, because then you have to be aware that you're about to speak, and then you have to design the words that you really want to say, because it's going to lead you to the place where you want to go. Your thoughts become your words, and then you act on your words, because you're labeling yourself by saying anything, and now you're forced to follow that instruction that you gave yourself. It's not that it's you, it's your body's doing it, your mind is doing it. Whenever you say something, you're like following the program. The word is a symbol, and you're attaching yourself to that, and that becomes you. If you said something else, that would be you. It's just, I don't know what else to say. It's the same thing as shooting the shot. It doesn't matter if I tell you to shoot it and you shoot it, and you say, well, I shot your shot. Being, no, you didn't actually shoot your shot. Or you didn't shoot my shot. You shot your shot in a way that you thought that I would shoot it. It's not ever going to be my shot unless I'm hitting the ball. I can explain how I'm doing it, but the way that I do it will be always different than the way you do it. Even if you do it better than me or the same exact result, the process will be different. So, this is like all comes down to your awareness of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and all that is a daily practice. You can't just show up to pool and then be like, okay, all of a sudden I'm going to just turn into this, super dialed in, like I know exactly what I'm going to do and all that. It doesn't just happen. You have to work on constant awareness practice when you're working, and dialing everything in to get better and better at it. And it's worth the energy, because if you want to get better at this game, you got to focus better than the other person. It's not so much about the physical skills. We all have time eventually to learn proper mechanics if we choose to, and then now those proper mechanics are going to get us plenty far, and now it's going to be more about like selecting proper shots, and then understanding that our body is repeatable, and now we need to have a repeatable system, and then now we can have repeatable results, and that's a mental consistency thing. You just got to be like, in this situation, when you're not playing, in these types of situations, I'm going to look for opportunities. I'm going to look for good things to happen. I'm going to look for, and I'm going to see what's really going on and what I can really do to help myself move forward and to achieve my goals, So, like I said, the goal setting is huge. It's like, I tell myself, it's like, well, all I have to do to be happy is be conscious enough to select my shot. Because that's all you need to do. That's your whole life. Every day is that. You'll be successful in your life if you can choose the next moment what you're about to do consciously with a clear heart, and it is very difficult over time to do that, because there's a lot of distractions that make you think that you need to do things that you don't necessarily need to do, and that can change the way you make your choices, and it can change a lot of things about your life. And by having an awareness what you really want, because you have goals which you set aside, which is part of the whole process of this, is that it's like if you don't have goals firmly etched in your mind and figure out how you're going to achieve those, then it makes it harder to make the ball, honestly, because you don't really know why you're doing it. If you knew that you were doing it for a specific reason, then now you have like a cause, right? And if you don't choose for that to happen, then now you're like, well, I can choose to be petulant today and not make the ball, and then I won't win, but I don't care because I don't have the goal of necessarily becoming a better player on paper written down somewhere off to the side where only I can see it, where I know who I really am and who I really want to be, and this is not that. So I'm not going to do that. Instead of that, I'm going to try to embrace the higher values and all that other stuff. And I can't just do it when I'm playing pool. It's all the time. If you don't brush your teeth, that's all day that you haven't brushed your teeth. You have to do it, and then once you've done it, now it's done. The same thing with pool. You have to decide how you're going to be, and then now you're that way, and you don't have to worry about it after that. You just did the thing that you're supposed to do, and once you've chosen what's going to make you happy about it, then you can be happy. And like I said, to me, as long as I choose my shot, then I'll be happy as best I can. Obviously, you can there's like issues with dealing with disappointment for not completing it. Obviously there's, when you're playing different scenarios, your mind can think, oh, I'm gonna I don't want to feel negative thoughts when I don't succeed and all that stuff. But that's what we're here for. You get in there with putting your best foot forward with your best intentions, and then you act on those. You take that information, and then you make decisions on what we got to do next. So as long as we're being continually, constantly conscious about what we're doing and using our awareness the whole time as much as we can, everything's going to be fine. You can keep steering the ship, and you can keep making decisions, and those decisions will continue to get better as you'll see as your awareness just builds on that thing. So any activity you can do to help build your awareness will help you. Another thing that's very helpful is to write down your pre-shot routine, or at least have a super solid understanding of it, so that you can basically recite it at will. So that when your visualizing practice comes, then you can be like, okay, well, what's my practice? Well, on a key shot that I need to make sure I do the thing. Once I plan the shot, which is is one of the difficult parts, I think, for people, is to make a decision. It's like, well, say I want to end up right here on this 3-ball, I'm going to make it and then come out to here so I can shoot the 4, come off the rail, and back for the 5, for instance. So it doesn't really matter. It's arbitrary. What matters is more that you're selecting the shot. For purposes of the drill or any situation, it's like, well, if you're playing 8-ball, 1 pocket, banks, all that stuff, you're going to be shooting different shots. What matters is that you're choosing an appropriate shot for the scenario that you're at. And I think that it's easy for everyone to realize that that's what you're doing without really thinking about it. Hopefully you're not shooting shots that are inappropriate for the situation, which maybe you're doing if you don't have clear goals, because then you can just shoot anything. But if you have clear goals, there's only really going to be 1 or 2 different shots available, because you're going to be in alignment with those goals if you're doing, if you're living your life the way you want to, which is that you're living your life in alignment with your goals. So on this, on this shot, I could have a different array of different goals, and this is part of like what you select before you're actually playing. Is maybe you're working on like, well, I'm going to be more precise with my visualization of watching the ball go in the hole, because I've been struggling with that. So instead of just shooting it without looking for a while, I'm going to add this layer where I really am precisely deciding, okay, I want it to go, to the left edge or the right edge, whatever it is, whatever you feel like you want to do. The point is to make that decision and then really focus on watching it go in. And then now that you can see it's going, now you come over here and you have a clear idea of like, okay, I know what it's going to look like when it goes in. Because this is all a visualization practice. This is all like imagining you're not here. You have to be able to be so dialed in with your process that you don't need to have a table to help you do what you're going to do in your mind. And this is not easy, because you have to
fabricate, imagine it. You have to use your, you have to get yourself to a point emotionally where you're engaged in the activity the same way you would be when you're shooting the shot. If you're frustrated at work and you're trying to visualize making this ball, it's going to be very difficult. You have to be, I would say, generate the feeling of what it's going to be like when you do the shot, the way you're going to do it, when you're doing it the way you want. So that has to do with like choosing the emotion that you want to feel when you're in the process of playing this game, because that's the practice is tied to the emotion. If your emotions are consistently one way, then your visualizations will be better when your emotional state is at that level. So, because you have had more practice with it. And I don't think people realize is that you're practicing your emotions all the time, that you're practicing everything else. They're habits, just the way everything else is. You're reacting to certain things, and that becomes a habit. It seems like, certain types of activities trigger you when they occur, and then it starts to cycle, and then we get habitualized to not realizing that we're in a cycle of these things happening, and then we react, and now we're like feeling the emotion, and then we get trapped maybe in a cycle that doesn't help us. And through the visualization practice, you can counter that by practicing feeling the emotion you actually want to feel, the desired emotion. Then when you actually visualize the shot and be successful, you're habitualizing making the shot, visualizing the shot, and the successful emotion that you want to feel. And that's what's important about it, because then when you're playing, you have practiced the emotion you want to feel in the competitive environment without actually being there. If you've added the crowd, other people, whatever to your visualization, which you can do over time, and that can help you really understand, like how deep you can get with it. I sort of lost my train of thought there, but I don't know if there's much more. I could just continue to go forever about this, but I'll say, what time is it right now?
10:41.
Yeah. Is there anybody want to say anything?
There's just one person watching.
All right, y'all are bored. It's cool. So.
There was 7.
Nice.
At one point.
Yeah, so I'd say visualization practices are good for when you're not at the table. Doing all the infrastructure work of setting your life up, is huge. If you're going to play League later and you want to be successful at it, I would say that you have a structure going into it that's going to help you be more successful versus, just randomly hoping that things work out for you just by showing up at whatever time you have to. You got to do what you got to do. But even if as long as you know that that's the scenario, you'd be like, okay, I know I'm not going to have a lot of time to warm up because I'm running a little bit late because I have these things happening, so that when I get there, I'm not going to be rushed, because I know that that's my tendency, is to feel rushed when I don't have a lot of time. But I already know that that's happening, so I'm actually prepared for it. So why should I feel rushed? I already know that these things are going to happen, so that when I come in and maybe I have to play and I haven't warmed up, then now instead of assuming that I'm going to play great, that I'm going to actually take a little bit more time for myself to calm myself and to ease myself emotionally into the situation, so that I don't just jump in there and then just fall right on my face because I'm not really ready to do anything other than take a break. But when you're playing, you can't just take breaks. But what you can do is slow yourself down and ease yourself into the match by choosing shots that are less demanding and more intelligent. But in order to do that, then you have to just be more patient, and that's easing yourself into it. But if you know you're going to be late going into it, or you're running late, then you can just, in your mind, you can try to play scenarios where you can be successful, even though, maybe there's a little bit of time pressure that you're feeling at this moment. It's like, have you ever seen someone just walk in off the street and then just start running the balls out with no problem, and then be like, oh, it's like, seems like you don't necessarily need to hit balls and warm up if you're ready to do the thing, you know? Because like, to me, you don't need to be nearly as prepared physically as you think if you're prepared mentally, you know? You can do a lot of stuff to get yourself ready, you know, like doing some jumping jacks or some energetic stuff to get your you know, your body physiologically where you want it to be, all kinds of things, you know. I'd say, you know, getting your fitness good as a general matter helps you, because this game can wear you out. Let's see what else is there for preparation. Yeah, I mean, you know, focusing on your routine and dialing it in while you're not playing, and kind of like understanding, okay, these are my like couple concepts that I want to work on while I'm playing, so that you don't have to just kind of like play it by ear. You actually have a dedicated, like, this is my intent of what I'm going to work on at the moment when I go to the place to play. You know, it's like, if it's, you know, maybe if you're playing in a tournament that it's a little bit higher buy-in than you're used to, so you may be feeling like, oh, it's a little bit higher buy-in, so I want to do really well, I want to try really hard, and all those things, you know, and all those that mentality is the thing you're trying to overcome. You know, it's like the amount of money that you're playing for shouldn't really dictate your like capacity for playing well. You know, it's more about your comfort level with understanding the situation you put yourself into, and a lot of it's just like, if you can frame it properly, then you can be more successful. And a lot of it's like, it's not about the money and etc. You know, it's easy to say that, but then at the same time, it's like, it doesn't necessarily make it work. What makes it work is realizing that if I just stop focusing on the scenario and just focus on what I'm doing, then I'll be fine. You know, the balls don't care if you're playing for $1 million or for nothing. You know, if you care, that's what's changing. You know, so if you're struggling in situations, you need to change. The balls don't care, you know. And that's the thing is that you have to jump into the change things. Like, even when you're not playing, you should be trying to change, because you know that you're growing and you're moving towards a thing. So at all times, if possible, you should be slowly grinding your way towards that through your life strategy. You know, by adding more and more reasons to be good at pool, you'll get better at pool, you know, because you'll have to. It's like, you know, for me, it's a little bit different. I've been playing a long time already, and I've gotten to a certain level to where now it doesn't make sense to stop and then start playing tennis and try to be a professional tennis player. You know, I enjoy the game, but at the same time, I like pool better, you know. And the weather sucks here, so we don't do that. I don't like to go outside when it's raining. That's why I chose pool in the first place. It's just an easy, casual game. But that's helped me. That commitment to the game is what helps me make balls, because I know there's nowhere else for me to go to learn how to play the game, another game, and be better at it. I'm not going to choose another game. I'm playing this game, you know. And by having that commitment, you can then forget about all the excuses that you might have, like, oh, I don't really care about this because I'm actually a golfer. You're like, well, you know, if you want to get good at pool, you got to start talking about yourself like you're a pool player, not like you play pool, but that's what you do, and that's, you know, you own that thing. And by labeling yourself as a thing, you're now commanding yourself to do the thing, you know. So you have to be careful about what you're doing, but you can also consciously put yourself in a situation where now you're taking ownership of something that is what you wanted to do anyways, which is kind of the point, I suppose. You know, if you want to be a great pool player, you have to eventually have someone label you as such, and you're probably going to be the first one to do it. And it's not like an ego thing, but at the same time, it's like, if you commit the time and energy to learning how to play the game, you'll get better, and then eventually someone might call you great at it, you know. It shouldn't be the reason why. It should just be more like, well, I know I'm not going anywhere. These people are all friendly enough for me to hang out with, so why should I bother looking for something else to do when I can just learn how to be good at this game, and then I won't be so frustrated when I miss, you know, because I won't miss as much, you know. And then when I do miss, I'll see what I did wrong and make corrections so that then I can improve. And then now the miss was all worth it because I've learned my lesson, you know. If you learn a lesson from every mistake that you make. Now, if you want to know everything, all you have to do is make all the mistakes that you can. You don't. That's all you have to do. And part of, I think, the fear that people have is the fear of making mistakes. But mistakes is how we got better. And nobody starts out even be able to hold the cue and hit the ball hardly. So we were making mistakes before we even knew that mistakes were what they were. You started calling them mistakes because you started having goals that you couldn't achieve, and that part of that process of growth is learning how to achieve those goals by facing these repeated mistakes with a little bit of equanimity and realizing this is part of the process. The greater process of growth is through making mistakes. So you should be constantly trying to make mistakes by challenging yourself to shoot shots and to do things and put yourself in situations where you cannot possibly succeed to the full extent that you'd like to. However, you give yourself room to grow and potentially surprise yourself. Not to say that you should use that as and go too far with it, because there's a certain level of like stress and strain that you're not going to be able to overcome that can actually harm yourself. So you do have to balance it. But the nice thing about a recreational activity like this is that no one's really in danger of like physical harm, or like having some sort of spiritual breakdown where, they go insane and you have to call the police. It's not that crazy. We can just take a break and go to the bathroom, wash our face, and everything's gonna be fine. Maybe have, take a drink or have a cigarette or whatever you gotta do, to get past that weird feeling that you're having. It's not going to be forever, and that's what's nice about pool is that as soon as you forget about what happened and you can start getting back to like getting better, the better, and that's part of the process too, but that can happen all in your daily life. Every time you make a mistake, you see what you did wrong, and then you decide, okay, well, instead of that, next time I'm going to do this, and I'm going to try that, and I'm not going to worry so much about all the things and how they're going. This is all part of the process of life, So I think in general, there's not much else than that. I'd say is it's easy to see when you really take a step back and look at your own life where you could do better, and then it just becomes about, okay, what is the smallest step that I can take towards that thing? Because that small amount of discomfort is easy to face, and it can be difficult when you're not set up for it. And this is a person by person case, I would say, is that some people require bigger stimuli to like make changes than other people do. I'm personally one of those people where I like to make small changes over time, but I invest heavily into progressive overload where I continue to add more and more as much as I can to test my limits repeatedly, and it forces you to make mistakes but not be where you put your foot on the gas so hard that you crash completely and just like collapse in a heap. The goal is to test yourself, not to have to take a weekend off to recover. You should just be able to, like, every day you wake up a little bit stronger, and then over the course of your whole life you've gotten way stronger. You're not trying to like bang in all the stuff in your whole life into 10 minutes and then have that be, we did it but we're dead now. Everyone has their life strategy, so you got to decide for yourself what you want to do. Some people like making big changes because that can then, it's like you have the clean slate where you're like going and doing a completely new thing, and then you learn from the new thing like what is going to work for you a little bit at, because there's so many new things. You're like, oh, I like this and this, that was not good, this and this. Or you can be like, well, I'm going to try this one little thing and then add to that and just tweak it and then move on when I get bored to this next little thing, and then you have like mix and match of those things, but like I said, a lot of it's just being aware of what you're doing and having fun with it, because that's what you're here to do. It's like you don't make changes because you have to, because it's like you have no other choice. The goal is to be in front of that type of thing where you're not doing things because you have to. It's because you're choosing to try to make yourself better, and not because you're forcing yourself to have to get better because of the way the environment has changed. You want to be able to change your environment by proactively increasing your ability, and that changes maybe the players that you play against,
to a higher caliber player as you increase, and that changes your environment. And now the environmental stress is that you're like expected to play at a higher level because everyone else is better and you don't want to suck. So by getting better, you're going to suck less compared to the group. And then you can then increase the difficulty level of the group that you're playing in, the high, the level of play, and then now you're still kind of in the same like, I need to improve because I feel like there's players here that are beyond my level. And that's kind of the quest of like, as you get better at pool, how you progress from like, playing with your friends, playing at the bar, you get a little bit better. Now they don't start beating you, and maybe there's like tournaments or whatever. So you might play a tournament and then you get whooped and you're like, dang, I'm not even ready for this. So then you're like, well, what can I do to get better? Like, well, maybe you play league because there's people playing league. So then you do that. And then you come back to tournaments when you get a little bit better and more crafty. Or you just be like, I really like tournaments because as soon as it's over, I get to leave and I don't have to score for people. I don't have to I don't have to do coaching. I don't have to, necessarily fraternize with everybody. Not that they're not my friends, but maybe I'm not the guy that wants to just talk constantly, and score for everyone all the time, and pay the money that way when I'm just trying to get my reps in. And, then a tournament is nice because, maybe you go to practice, but then you got people playing serious pool because there's money involved. And now I get to find out what's really going on a little bit about myself because I'm testing myself, and you can make that choice, but you got to be objective about what you're doing, and then now kind of like what you're going to get out of it. But it's a lot of things, like awareness and consciousness of like just being like, this is what my goals are, and then it's obvious what you should do. That's the thing. I think people don't set goals and then they don't know what they should do. If you're trying to get better at pool, it's simple. You shoot a shot. If it doesn't end up where you wanted to, you need to work on it. I mean, there's nothing more to it than that. It's whether or not that's the right shot to make you better than another shot that you practice would be is not as relevant as you think. Because I feel like it should be obvious that if you work on one thing, you get better at it. And now when you play, there will be another thing that pops up. It's like, oh, I could get better at that. And now it's about awareness again, seeing what you're doing, and then deciding you want to do something a little bit different, and then making a plan, and then executing on that. And then that becomes a habit that isn't just for pool, but it's for your whole life. It's like, well, when you're taking out the trash every day, and then maybe there's like an object that's in the pathway, and now you have to go around it every time. When you could just move that thing and it'd be gone forever, and it's like you can either deal with it forever, a little bit of inconvenience, or you can eventually just decide, you know what? If I move that object out of my way, I clear that thing out of my path, now I have a clear path, my quality of life's going to go up, and all it was a slight amount of energy. That's what pool is. It's like, well, if I'm overcutting this ball every time, then how much better is my life going to be if I just start cutting it in every time? So much better. And all you have to do to learn how to do that is just hit it. I don't know how many times it'll take. Nobody knows. The point is that you won't learn unless you do it. But as soon as you start doing it, yeah, you're going to be frustrated because it doesn't go in. But eventually it will, because you'll see what you're doing wrong just by repetition. So you don't have to, there's not too much going on. If I'm hitting this 3-ball into that hole, and it goes to the right of the hole, that means that I needed to aim to the left of where I aimed. Or that where I hit that I thought was the spot is not the spot, it's actually a different spot. And that all I'm looking to do is find that spot, and then eventually I find it. Then when I find it, I'm like, okay, well, now I gotta be learn how to hit it there. And then ideally I can learn how to hit the cue ball to get to that spot easily without having to try so hard, without having to work at it so hard. And then now I can use that awareness to do something else. And that's the process where it's like, yeah, you got to focus really hard on it at the beginning because you don't know exactly what it looks like. And as you start getting a sense of what it's supposed to look like, then you can start repeating that a little bit more and more, and then eventually it becomes way more automatic, and that's what we're looking for. But you can see how that's a process. It doesn't just happen in one day. But the beauty of it is it doesn't take as long as you think. If you spend 10 minutes lining up this bank shot into the side and you missed it the first 5 times, eventually you start making it. But then once you make it like 2 or 3 times in a row, I'm not even really aiming, I'm just going to hit it. So hit it there, you set it back up, similar angle, hit it again.
see where it goes. Short again, right? I'm not even really aiming. But then, like, okay, well, what do I need to do? It's like, well, cut it more. So instead of hitting it here, I'm going to hit it here, right? Is that going to make it go? Yes. Okay, well, let's test that theory, right? Basically the same spot, right? You just hit a few balls, you'll start to see, that one I hit a little bit short, right? You start to see where the ball's actually going, and then you can start dictating, okay, well, now what change do I need to make it go in a different place? But the initial repetition of hitting the ball tells you exactly what you need to know if you're just looking for it. Like, I'm hitting the ball straight out from my body with no English, is that location that the cue ball is going to go on that pathway? Is that going to make the ball go in that hole or not? And then you hit it and you find out. And then if it doesn't go, you have all the information needed. It went right, left, you hit it too hard, maybe, all that stuff if you pay attention to it. That has to do with knowing that you're actually getting down the ball straight, which you can practice anywhere. You have a line, pretend that's the shot line. Like, you're going to shoot a ball straight down that line and then learn how to place your cue directly on it every time. Right? There's so many ways to get better that, if you just do a little bit of effort, will get you better. So I think we're about out of time. I appreciate everyone that made it this far.
Got 3 people.
If anybody wants me to talk for longer, now's the time. But it's okay if you don't. Anyways, let's see what's happening in the near future. Do we have anything going on? Not really.
I don't think so. Just the weekly calls as usual, starting back up on Monday.
Yeah, we're trying to do as many of these streams as we can, 2 to 3 a week if possible, talking about random pool stuff. So I'm just coming up with ideas out of the hat. Yeah, and as far as stuff that I'm preparing for, that maybe some people that are watching this, the Eric Storer Memorial Tournament is coming up in the beginning of January, so I'm playing in that event. That's bar table 9-ball, I think, and then playing in an event at 128 Billiards tonight. Actually, it's a 10-ball tournament, so I've been practicing my 10-ball game. And a lot of it's just what I've been working on is the kind of stuff that I'm talking to y'all about. It's just more focusing my time when I'm not playing pool, because you have to do that, and trying to learn techniques that will help me when I am playing pool be better at it without having to switch gears so much. It's more of I'm flowing into each activity, and I'm designing my life such that it makes sense for me to get better at pool. And I think that everyone can set their lives up in that way where it's advantageous to get better, and then it becomes okay to do it, and then you don't worry so much about what other people think about what you're doing, because it doesn't matter. You're like, well, I'm not worried about my skill rating, in league, because I'm not playing league, and I want to get better. And I think that one of the struggles that people have is that, for instance, if you get better when you're a league player, now you're forced to maybe find another team, and then maybe you can't play on the same team as you are, and you have, all that stuff. And that becomes a distraction that can actually take reasons away from you increasing your skill level, because you're having to deal with social things that you might not want to deal with, that can, you're going to have to make changes, is my point. And those changes are what is being resisted, that makes it harder to get better, is that the rest of your life will change if you get better at pool, and that's a fact. You can't just get better at pool by itself. Your whole life will change. Maybe not a lot, but the better you get, the more different it will be. And I can't, get people to understand that without actually having it done. But if it happens to you like it happened to me, then you'll see that your life is not the same as you get better. You learn things about pool that tell you and show you that life is not the way you thought it was when you were not as good of a player. You realize how much more control you have over everything that you're doing once you start applying the decision that you're going to control your life, and that itself is a challenge that you have to accept on your quest to becoming better. So of all the things, maybe that would be a key thing, is just realizing that change is the thing that people are avoiding, and that's the thing that you have to embrace if you want to get better, because getting better is actually changing. You can't be the same and be better. So because of that, you have to give up part of your identity and find a new one as you increase your skill. That's part of it, is my identity is changing because my words that I use are changing, because I can then more, consciously be like, this is actually what's happening, and then doing the thing. And the less you can do that, the less you see that how much change is really occurring. And then by seeing that your growth is just changing, and then seeing how change is always happening all around and everything is so temporary, that you can start like releasing yourself from feeling like you need to be a certain thing, and just kind of going with the excitement of the newness of what's happening, so to speak. So hope you all had a great time. I know I did. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one.
Alrighty.